It's loading right now. And transferring the data over to YouTube. Yeah. Slow to load. Okay, now it's okay. It should be up now. Yeah, it's live now. Okay. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the lives that we do for Saddle Fit. Today we're going to talk about briefly touching on girths, and we're also going to show you how to check the fit on your personal saddle so that you can check to see if it's fitting okay or if there's any major problems without necessarily having the saddle fitter out. This is Jochen Schleese. He's been on my channel several times now, and for those of you who don't know him, he owns the saddle company Schleese, and he's a master saddle fitter and has a lot of really good and important knowledge on saddle fit and all things horses. So yeah, we're just going to have a discussion today about those types of things. And if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat. Yeah. So if you want to introduce yourself, Jochen, or say anything to start off.
Yes, good being with you again. I always enjoy our little time.
Yeah.
I'm going to share my screen a little bit and want to let everybody know that at Saddle Fit for Life is an educational arm of Schleese. And we have all kinds of saddles here at Schleese. The latest one is our racing saddle. We don't have a picture on that yet with a jockey on our website, but soon to come. But it doesn't matter if you're Western event rider, dressage or show jumper or pleasure rider. We're really focusing on fitting saddles to the horse and to the rider. And one of the biggest people I follow is Dr. James Warson, who talks about how incredible difference the male and the female pelvis and spine is, as well as the upper legs, musculature, and soft parts. And it really doesn't matter if you ride for a hobby, as a war, or as for work. In the end of the day, we're trying to align two beings, you know, a horse and a rider. And sometimes we have very small riders on very large horses, or vice versa, very large rider on smaller horses. So here at Saddle Fit for Life, Schleese follows the Saddle Fit for Life philosophy. And we want to make sure people really understand that there is a lot of opinion about how the pelvis and the rider fit on the horse's back. And people ask you and me all the time, you know, says, well, how do I check if it fits? You know, we have all these different opinions from these different experts. Well, one thing for sure, the horse will tell you, you know, and the saddle pads is a big story. The girth, we cover briefly the girth, but you know, we can use thermography to check it. We can look at experts like veterinarians who understand biomechanics for horse and rider, or professors who study all their life. So myself as a 3-day event rider, you know, this was my best friend and I lost him to, well, I'm embarrassed to say it, to saddle fit. You know, I learned saddle making and I did my master saddler after several years as a journeyman. Before that was 3 years as an apprentice. But nobody ever taught us this, you know, how saddles have to fit. Only years after I surrounded myself with professors from all over the world. So what I think, Shelby, would be really, really cool if we can dive in today and tell people the saddle fit to horse and rider is crucial, because what we're trying to do is, if the sternum of the rider aligns with the sternum of the horse and the ball of the foot, then you know you're in balance and you sit right. But whatever fits in between, how it fits the rider or how it fits the horse, could be detrimental to the fun, success, or joy to the horse and to the rider. So today I thought I should start with very simple ways to explain people. We do not want to have saddle anywhere on bones which are sensitive, which is in the lumbar area, shoulder, or spine. So if I have to put a line on it, it would look like that. No saddle, no matter what you ride, what division, male or female rider, the horse will be crippled long-term, sometimes for life, if you put excess pressure on the cartilage, spine, lumbars. Only on top of the rib cage we want to sit. This is a trapezius. Many people heard about the trapezius, but in the same shape, just underneath, is spinalis. So on the right side of the horse, you have the superficial layer, just like on humans. Horses have different layer of muscle, one layer on top of the other. So the very important part for me as a jumper, eventer, racing, dressage, any type of a rider, never pinch that triangle. So when I look from the side, you can see the triangle there. And if I have put a bar in it, so the pink bar is for thousands of years when people build saddles for horses, they're always focused, whoopsie, they're always focused on that particular bar. Okay, so they don't want to spend any pressure other than where you see here the bar. You see not on the lumbar, not on the cartilage, way away from the spine. So the very first test, before I even put the saddle on my horse, I flip my saddle on and I need to have my whole hand width. If you're a lady, that would be less than 10 centimeter. Every average horse, the spinal nerves, the spinal processes, the transverse, the multifidus muscle is 10 centimeter wide on an average horse. So if your hand is not 10 centimeter, like this one here has 3.5 fingers, that means you would sit on the spine. The worst part, you do spinal surgery. Before spinal surgery, your vet would see it with thermography. You have lots of damage and heat. If you see these deformity or marks on the spine, you already know it's too late, because kissing spine does not occur just on top. So here you see a spine where all these spinal processes glued and grew together, calcification. But when they have problems down here, right, where my mouse runs, that's where you really see the problem. Let me close that up. You see the green circle? That green circle is a normal size hole where the spinal nerves goes out. Here already with calcification, it starts to go smaller. That means the horse will have a lot of balance problems. So imagine you have a saddle, what sits on the spine, and you don't realize how the bone protects each other by growing bone. So the spine protects each other by growing bone, and all of a sudden, all the spine, what goes through the organs, to the various muscles, all the nerves, you end up with all these unnecessary problems, from colic to ulcer to stumble through, you name it. It's incredible what you can learn by just simple stay on the strongest and longest and fattest muscle what the horse has to give you. It starts at the neck and goes diagonal up towards the top of the pelvis. And right in the center of that big long muscle, that the massage therapist, physiotherapist, all the veterinarians, everybody who knows muscles or anatomy calls us the belly of the muscle. And just like the word belly means that's the biggest part. So right there for thousands of years, see how it goes downhill here? That's where we want to put this up. On top of the spine, okay? Starting at the pole, connecting to the shoulders and the withers, all the way through the SI joints, all the way down to the hock, is this massive cable. Now, when the horse has the haunches underneath the sternum, no more weight on the front. So this is your sliding stop, your jump, your canter period, anything for the horse to become absolutely light in front. These ligaments have to stretch tremendously. So Chelsea, can you show me, sorry, Shelby,
Yeah.
can you do me a favor? Let me just move this down a little bit here. Can you show me on your hand, show me your tendons. Can you see them?
Oh yeah, like
There? When you move your fingers, can you feel the tendons?
yeah.
So can you grab your thumb and rub back, or your index, rub back and forward on that tendon? Feels weird, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't
So
like that.
have you ever hit that tendon while walking by a table?
Yeah, I actually broke my hand on this, and yeah, it's very painful area to have anything bad happen to.
So before you break the hand, can you imagine you just injure the ligaments, how that
Yeah.
impacts your fingers, right?
Oh yeah, it would be really hard. Like the doctors actually told me that hands suck to injure like anything bone related or ligament related because it can like paralyze how you use your hand or like affect your grip long term. So
So here's what
not
people
good.
need to understand. It's a really cool saying I saw somewhere written. I think it was at the University of Cambridge in England. If you count, if you count how many letters it's in the word bone and in the word ligament, in each letter is a week to heal. A bone heals much faster on the horse than ligaments. So if you really don't want to have massive spinal injuries, I recommend you stay off these ligaments. Okay, so if you don't want to have a saddle what causes your problem, this is why I took a lot of time here to make that very clear. You have to stay off the ligaments of the horse. Okay, besides the ligaments, the tiny little wee muscles, what we got to protect. Otherwise, the backbone, the muscle will, well, atrophy. And I talk about the spinalis. So here's a close-up from the spine. From the end here to this side, that's 10 centimeter. Between the yellow is the ligaments I was just talking about, right? And then here you see the multifidus muscle. If you put any pressure on that, that would be super dangerous because you atrophy the horse. So here you see lumbar vertebrae, and you can see this little duda here, and where my finger is, this is where the multifidus be. Okay, so that is behind the rib cage, and look how thin these bones are, right? So, but these babies here, these are the spinal nerves. And when you touch that, the horse instantly goes on the hollow back. And you say, so what? I just poke him and I'm going to, well, make him go round. You can't. And let me tell you why. When you think the horse will avoid the spinal nerves, they go hollow like this. Look how much weight goes on the forehand, and there kiss your ligaments and tendon bye-bye in the joints. So you have to ride 20 minutes before you make the spinal nerves numb. You can ride like this horse right away, get the haunches underneath. If you stay off the ligaments, off the multifidus, and off the spine I was just showing you. Okay, so if we want to make sure we don't sit on the spine, look at this saddle, shall we? That saddle here fell over to the right.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you put a saddle on, a good way for you to check is after you're riding, look at the sweat marks. If you say, well, he's so hairy, or I have so much pads, if you ever concerned, all you need to write is 3 circles to the left, 1 in walk, 1 in trot, 1 in canter, and the same on the other side. Then take the saddle off, you have no pad on it, and you will see exactly where the hair pattern or the dust mark will go. So if your saddle has a nice wide channel, but it shifts to the right, 7 out of 10 do.
Oh wow, that's bad.
You have a problem because that forces, like you see here in the anatomy picture, a lot of problems. Rails, this horse will kick the front rail off with the front left. Why? You see the left leg sticking out, the right leg is on, because the saddle is kicking over to the right. 7 out of 10 do. This horse here had to be euthanized because this horse always lands hard on the front right. Right? It was top horse. So the shifting and the rotation, I can really test. So the next part is probably the most important part, what I want to cover this hour. When we talk about dry spots, or we talk about withers. Let me show you how long, let me see where it is. I have it here somewhere. Okay, this is how long a withers is on a horse. Let me stop this. Okay, so this is a very long bone. This is the longest spinal processes on a horse. Okay, so that is the top part of the withers. Okay, and from here, like my hand, to the side, there's a lot of gap area. Let me show you on this horse. So if you look at the back of the, let me come back with the pen. So this is the top of the withers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you can see it there.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of space in between.
Yeah, between the scapula and the withers. So I'd never realized that they're that far
And
apart.
down where my fingers is, look at where the ribs are. Right? So
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's where the saddle needs to rest on it. So on a horse with muscle, it would look like that. Okay, you can see this is the spinalis and the trapezius. So if you want to pinch that wither muscle, so it's kind of like this. Okay, if you just want to squish that and pinch that wither muscle, I do right here. Many saddles do that. So there's a very easy way for me as a rider to check, hey, is my saddle pinching my wither muscle? Let me show you a picture again so it makes it really clear. So here's that long bone I showed you. Here are the ribs, and these are all the muscles I just pinched. The most painful is the top one because that makes the horse balance in his neck. Spinalis and the trapezius, this is somebody pinches you in the neck. So if we want the horse, I think I showed you that before, to use this muscle properly, check out how, when the horse steps forward, the shoulder goes back here, right? And all these, with these side wither muscle have to be free. Otherwise, your horse will cross the rail, he gallops half the speed he could, he develops a U-neck, right? Because he's only gonna protect him. If I grab those pliers and pinch on your neck, man, would you complain?
Yeah.
Right? So the muscle has to work perfectly, okay? Otherwise, it will atrophy, okay? So when I touch the spine or the ligament or the nerves, that muscle will atrophy. If I pinch the withers, it will atrophy, okay? Many people will say, oh, all race horses have these big holes.
No, they don't. No, they don't. Oh, yeah. If they shouldn't have those.
Right? So all these holes, you get these long bones, okay? We can prove not only with the technology, but we can also prove how the horse canters, you know, because this horse, we showed you that I think too, has no more spinal movement.
No back movement at all, yeah.
Right? So that is all fused and the neck is completely raised. So today I want to avoid that, okay? I want people to say, hey, how can I check my own saddle? We can't go in everything today in terms of how to check the fit to the rider, the fit to the horse, but what we could check is this, okay? Let's start with the girth. We go a little more in detail with the girth. Everybody knows that we want to have the girth buckle higher of the elbow. But nobody knows where my pen is a muscle. In the picture, you see it right there. That's your chest muscle, your pectoralis. So if you have been tickled on the kid as a kid here, you hate it, you suck back. So make sure the girth buckle, the end of the buckle, is always 4 inches or 10 centimeter higher than the elbow, okay? If you go too high, you would never do that, okay? You would sit on the edge of the latissimus. That muscle runs all the way to this arm. So when the lower arm goes forward, so let's have a look where my little nifty pony leg is. Oh, right here. Okay, so when this lower arm goes forward, okay, that shoulder goes back. But that means this muscle stretches. So if you put the buckle on that edge, the horse stumbles. He doesn't go forward. And sometimes, this is the bizarre part, sometimes people say, oh my God, all I did is change the girth and I didn't cause a rail anymore. He doesn't stumble anymore. Oh my God, he stopped taking off his own iron with the back hoof because he couldn't get his leg out of the way. If the buckle sits on this edge, the horse is limited to 80% because that edge this muscle allows the leg to go forward. So how long should the girth be? This is the coolest and easiest trick for me to check. Oh, there goes my way.
Oh no.
Alive in my little room. So on the jumping saddle, you always want to have the buckles as high as possible. Once you finish regirth, you want to end up in the last 3 holes, counting from the top down.
Wow.
Okay? That's where you want to girth. So lower you go, so closer you get to this muscle.
Yeah.
And on the dressage saddle, okay, same thing. You want to end up as high as you can, because this flap on a dressage saddle ends where my mouse is, approximately there. Okay, a short girth will never go high enough to hit that latissimus. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So now we come to the main part. This part here, back here, super, super sensitive. We must stay off the lumbus versus processes. Okay, so they are so sensitive. If you hit those, the horse will buck or go, well, what do? They go in the sense of 4-beat canter.
Oh yeah. Hollowing out.
If you don't stay off that, he will do whatever he can to protect it.
Yeah.
Okay,
so it's pretty clear when you see like the actual spine. Like I don't think most people are aware of how the vertebrae change back there. Like I didn't know it actually looks like that.
You know what for me was the kicker? The first time I hold that, I just want to put that in perspective. First time I hold this piece of lumber towards a pen. Look how thick a pen is and how thin this bone is.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Okay, so you think you need a lot of force to break it? No way. So the horse will do whatever it can to avoid that pressure. So that's why I cannot emphasize enough, never pass the last rib. So the cool part is you can look at how the light hits the flank. When I say light hits the flank, you see sometimes depends, there you can see it, it's shiny, okay? Back there is what we call the ring of lights. So I'm gonna look for a couple more pictures. The ring of lights is so easy to identify if the sun hits it or the light hits it. Once you know what to look for, you see it all the time. So it's actually pretty obvious. Let me see if I can see it from here. No, the croup is too high. So it's a very good indicator in order to avoid these massive holes in the lumbar.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy.
The deformity on the spine. Do not sit in the ring of lights. Here you can see the hair is darker.
Yeah.
So that's the ring of light. So the saddle can never be past that arrow. That's where that starts. Very easy to identify. So that back spot, that is what I call the bucking reflex point and one of the most nastiest point most saddles hit. So how do I check my saddle? I put it on the horse behind the shoulder blade. We already have seen how the horse moves from the top down. Okay, so we want to go from the mane down 8 inches. That's where the end of the shoulder blade is. So let me show you again, just to make sure. Okay, you want to go 8 inches down from the withers. That's the spot where your saddle starts. How far down? Ring of light. So you can see how they flare out. Okay, so That's another check for you to do. Check where your saddle sits. So let's summarize what we got so far. We have the spinal width, which is very important. So let's say I go to a tack shop and I have 5 saddles I really, really like and I want to buy them. Turn them over. If your fist doesn't fit in it, front to back in the spine, your horse must be a very, very small animal with a very, very narrow spine. The average horse has 10 centimeters there.
Wow.
That's my first check. The next check, what I do is I want to make sure that the length fits. On TikTok or on our YouTube is a very easy way of measuring your horse's back length. Okay, and that is, one more time, down 8 inches, okay, all the way down 20 centimeters from the top of the withers, find the edge of the bone, and then go to the beginning of the ring of light. So that's your distance. So we want to stay away from the spinal nerves. Then I had a little horse where I pinch with the pliers into the wither muscle here. Okay, now I come to the difficult part, but it's a good one to check because it's very easy to check. Okay, and that part I call the tree width and tree angle. I think we talked about that before, right,
Yeah.
Shelby? I don't know why I call you Shelby.
Yeah. That's okay. I do
No.
that too, where you start using the wrong name and then it just sticks. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a horse I do that too all the time. And I'm like, whoops.
Not intended whatsoever.
No worries. Yeah.
Okay, let me find that I have a good picture for you. I want to
Yeah.
show before I go on the actual saddle horse there.
Yeah. Super
Um,
interesting.
we talked about the spinal clearance. We talked about the ligaments. Now we talk about the shoulder width. During the age, while the horse gets wider, this gets wider. So tree width needs to be D-ring to D-ring. If I look at the saddle, every saddle has a D-ring. Okay? From D-ring to D-ring, that space. Again, if you go to the tack shop, you have 5 saddles there, measure D-ring to D-ring. You will see, let's say you have 3 of those 5 of the same make, same manufacturer, same seat size, but measure the difference in the distance of the D-ring distance. There you know if it's a narrow, medium, wide. So order the horse 3, 5, 8, the wider the shoulder gets. Okay, so if I have a young horse, they don't have not wide tree yet. Then comes the wither angle.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to pinch the top of the withers. So that angle is different in the wither. So that's why we have tree angle. So I'm going to show you how you can check for that. If you have a saddle, you don't want to buy one, you want to just check, hey, does my saddle fit in that tree angle? Okay. So if you don't, that's when I pinch the horse on the withers. So let me switch cameras. Oh, there was one more pictures. That's a good picture to take when you, sorry, a good check to do when you ride. And that is if the saddle slides forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Walk, trot, canter, those 3 different steps, circles each direction. And then you look, did my saddle slide in front of the shoulder or on top of the shoulder? Unfortunately, many saddles do because the girth is the wrong shape, or most of the time it's a saddle pad. And if it's a saddle, it's the billets don't align properly, or the tree angle and tree width, which we're going to go show you now, doesn't fit. So if the saddle slides on this point, I show you on another horse dummy in a minute, okay? Then that's a lung meridian point. It really cripples the cartilage. Okay? This here, BL13, respiratory health. That means if you push on that, your horse goes in stress. And stress mode means he has an elevated heart rate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Okay, enough horrible pictures. Let me show you now this picture here. This is the triangle where we don't want to pinch. And that is the midsection of the longest part of the horse's back. So behind me, I'm going to turn off the camera to switch the camera. I'm going to show you a close-up from this pink bar. What is the, well, the, what do we call it? Saddle support area. So bear with me for a sec.
Yeah, no worries. We're gonna see.
Did that make sense so far?
Yeah, no, that does. There was one person who had a question, and their question was, does every saddle need to be a custom fit?
No, not really, because the saddle itself, some of them can be adjusted. But if you buy a saddle, what cannot be adjusted, yeah, then you need a custom fit.
Okay.
So is this overexposed, or is that okay?
No, it looks fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So here is the area your horse can carry you for a long, long time on these 3 boxes. Let me explain what all this means. So the first area is where the shoulder blade is inside. The shoulder blade has on top 4 inches cartilage. And if the saddle goes on top of the cartilage, it breaks it. This circle, it's a lung meridian point. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Jochen?
Yeah. Yeah.
This triangle is when you grab a horse and pinch him here. This triangle is probably the worst of all the pinching areas, and it's 10 centimeters down from the withers, or 4 inches. And then another 4 inches below that triangle is where the horse can tolerate weight. So when stallions fight for dominance, they bite here. Or when stallions go on the mare, they bite here. Okay, so this is the, and then what does a mare do? Hollows the back, don't go forward. So we don't want anything what pinches here. This here is the ligaments we did with your hands. These are the spinal nerves. And that's pretty much it. And then here's the lumbar area. You want to stay away. So in reality, it's actually pretty easy when you look at like that. So let's put a saddle on it. If I put the saddle on, wherever the D-ring is, okay? The D-ring, I think I mentioned that last time, it's riveted in front of the tree metal plate. So let me just show you here. So here you see a hole. That's where the D-ring goes in. And then comes out in front of the metal. So you can see this tree here has a red area and a white area. So when I put a saddle on, let's say there would be stuffing on it. The pen should be easy running in between here. There should be no contact. 10 centimeters down, right there where the D-ring is. And then it should have contact. Logic, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
You have a saddle on it, put the D-ring behind the lung meridian point there. Put the pen in, and you can see where the D-ring is. My pen slid very easy all the way down that D-ring. Perfect. Cool. So now I'm going to check, is the saddle wide enough in the spine? Okay, so not only in the front, all the way back here. Is that wide enough for my average horse's spine? Okay, if it's not, the saddle fitter has to narrow or widen it, whatever you require. That's an easy task to do. So if we got the wither clearance, now I look in the back. You see how this saddle is too long? Let me come around and maybe show you. Okay, so this here, you say, oh, it doesn't touch.
Yeah.
Well, when the rider sits down and you ride around corners,
yeah, it'll hit.
It will hit. And you saw how fragile those little muscles are. So once I have that saddle on, I'm going to look at this part here. Can you see the stirrup bar?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to switch sides to show you the stirrup bar again. The stirrup bar has to be level when you put your stirrup leather on it, otherwise the stirrup leather falls off. So when you want to see if your saddle is properly balanced, all you need to look when it's on the horse, is the stirrup bar level to the ground? Here, it goes downhill. That means it's too high in the front.
Yeah.
I have lots of clearance in the front, and the rider would sit in the last third. So let me explain why this is so bad. The last third is, see this line here? Just make sure there's nothing in the way. The last third goes to the closest to the ribs. So here we go. You see how the ribs comes together? So then they go up here. So all rodeo riders, bullfighters, everybody sits where my thumb is.
Yeah.
That would be the center of those 3/3. You sit at the base of the withers, because there is where these spinal processes are level. The ribs are together. And the reason why you don't sit on top of the withers is because it's super painful.
Yeah.
And
not fun.
Because of the shoulder blade rotates here. Okay, so saddle fitting has to be away from the lung meridian point. It has to be off the spinal nerves, of the ligaments, the withers, the cartilage, and the rider has to be balanced. It has to be sitting here. So if I'm putting the rider on top, this would be too far back.
Yeah.
Here is where everybody sits. So I think if everybody would remember one thing, and the most important part is saddle off the lung meridian point, and when the saddle sits on, this pen got to slide easy down 10 centimeter or past the D-ring. If everybody checks this, the most important trigger point is taken care of. Many saddles have a lot of clearance on the withers, but none on the side. Have you heard that term before, pinching the withers?
Oh yeah, like I've seen a lot of horses that have like the white hair scarring from the saddles pinching the withers.
Yeah. Well, look at this saddle here, because there's a big discrepancy and says, oh, I think saddles with short 3 points should fit. Look how little weight-bearing surface this saddle has on this horse. So that would be high impact pressure. So for me, the 3 point is very important to not hurt the horse. And if I show you this one here, this is even worse. Right? Don't even come to the weight-bearing surface. It just clamps on the withers. So for many riders or people who buy saddles, when I put a jumping saddle on, look how long this one is.
Yeah.
That's really bad. Okay. So saddles can be really long with extra panels in the back, or with super long pommels. Okay. So the rider can always have a nice big seat, but the bottom doesn't have to be extra long. So that's another topic, but it doesn't matter if it's dressage saddle, jumping saddle. This pen also goes all the way down underneath the D-ring. You can see my mark, and that is important. Stirrup bar, I'm looking for, is it level? Looks a little better. Then you can lift this up. You can lift this up, and then you can run. You take a pen, easier than your hand, stick it underneath, and then run the pen through here, and you see there's no contact here.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see if it's nice and even and smooth, because that saddle would like really ride bad because that rock I don't know about you, but I hate saddles with rock.
Yeah, if they lift up while you're posting and stuff, that
Yeah.
sucks.
So I think we should open it maybe now for questions and answers.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll
Let's see
just
if there's
let them
anybody
know.
there, or we can
Oh yeah,
help.
there's a couple. Someone asked this. I think you've already answered. Is how do you tell if the saddle will pinch the withers? And yeah, we answered that with the pen. And then someone said, can you tell me how I can measure my horse for the best gullet size?
Okay, let me think this, if there's a cool picture I can show you. Okay, so here you see this super thin muscle, what goes all the way from the pelvis to the top. That's not the longissimus. Okay, so these small muscles around the vertebrae are so important not to be pinched. So if you want to be super cautious, always say, I want 10 centimeter gullet. In saddlery, the bottom of the saddle, we call the whole thing gullet,
Okay.
on front to back. And then there is an area what we call gullet plate. So let me triple emphasize. I have to just find that one picture to answer that question pretty good, because that's a good question. Okay, so when I talk about gullet, I talk about the spinal clearance for the horse. Okay, the entire area from front to back. When I talk about gullet size, sometimes people talk about the gullet plate. So I would recommend to says, what is my tree width or tree angle? Okay, so again, saddle makers, tack shops call this the gullet from front to back. Always go with 10 centimeter, because if you have a horse that's a little narrow, it's easier to put a half pad in between or two thin saddle pads.
Yeah, and then too tight.
But if it's too wide, you can't do anything, right? You're pinching the nerves. So if I want to measure the shoulder, the gullet width, I have to find the picture to make it clear. Here we go. So D-ring to D-ring. Okay, so where would that area sit on a, why do we need to have that wide? Because when the horses jump, both shoulders come back. Trot, one goes forward, one goes back. So what I would suggest, when you're on the horse, okay, you put the whip on the widest part on the shoulder. This is from a book from a veterinarian, which is over 20 years old. And she says to put the other whip on the side of the panel here. So make it nice and parallel to the flap, starting at the D-ring. Now, when you put the whip on the side, don't put the whip on top of the shoulder. Make it parallel. Remember, this is 10 centimeter cartilage. The whip has to be parallel here, right? So there, that's 10 centimeter down. So where the arrow starts, right there, that's where the whip has to be level. If you push the handle in, that's why she used the handle, because the handle can't go in. So let's say you have a whip without that knob on top. Don't make the mistake, like if you look at my pen, that you put the whip like this. Make sure it sits flush where my pen is, and that edge is 10 centimeter down, approximately where that arrow is. Can you follow what I'm saying, Shelby?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So here you can see, if you put it on top, it's a different angle than down here.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's how you can check for the shoulder angle. If you say, well, I don't have a saddle, I want to measure my horse, and I would recommend, here we got three different tree width, from D-ring to D-ring, different spaces, right? So what I recommend is take a tracing over the widest part of the horse's shoulder and take a next extra tracing behind the horse's shoulder. The reason why I recommend that is because it helps you to take that cutout and bring it to your tack shop, or when you cut it out of cardboard, you can take that cardboard and hold it against the saddle you see at the tack shop. You can say, okay, here's my horse's shoulder angle. I wonder if it fits my my saddle. Let me see if I can find a better picture for you, for me to explain that. Nope, just bear with me. Okay, here we go. So let's say you take a tracing over the widest part, you will see the left one would be much more bulged out than the right. So you put it on the piece of cardboard, cut it out, put the tracing back on, and mark left and right. So whatever you have left, the cutout itself, you can hold it against your saddle. Second tracing, do that behind that big shoulder blade. So with that, you can measure the horse tremendously. If you say, I don't want to send the tracing, I want to send in the measurements, then what you need to do is from the middle, go down 10 centimeter and measure from left to right, another 10 centimeter from left to right. So let me explain that on the little horse dummy behind me. I need to switch cameras again.
Don't bark.
So you can see where the D-ring is here. Okay. And you can see down there, if you take the saddle off, where this area is. So if you measure 10 centimeter down, this is over the widest part of the shoulder. Okay. That's the widest part, another 10 centimeter down. So if you have the cutout, you have the cross section from left to right. That gives you the tree width. Okay. So if you have a tool, like a measuring device, you could put that measuring device on, let me see if I find one. This measuring device is over 100 years old.
Oh,
Okay?
cool.
And it's just an angle, yeah, it measures angle. So now I have it, I tighten it down. So this is a 37 degrees tree angle.
Okay.
And that's a problem when you say, oh, I have a narrow tree. This doesn't look narrow. Some companies call this wide, some call this medium, some call it narrow. So there is no standardification. So the best way is you cut it out behind the shoulder and over the shoulder.
That makes
so
sense.
I hope that answered the question.
And then I have another question that where someone asked, is it similar to check fit for Western saddles with the pen method and whatnot?
Okay, I go back to my Western saddle then. Yes, it is. But I start off first with, let me see if the camera comes back. There you go. All right, so first of all, I'm looking at the tree from a Western tree, right here. So here's your typical Western tree.
Mm-hmm.
The Western tree, because the anatomy of the horse is still the same. But let's say my arm is the bar of the tree. It sits all the way here, but the front flares away. We call that the front flare. Okay, it flares away. You want to have a pen clearance here. The rear goes all the way to where my pen is. The rear flare needs to flare away. So if I put a Western tree on top, the concho you have down here got to be, go 20 centimeter down, 8 inches down. You find the edge of the bone. That's where the concho goes. This tree has a nice front flare. Lots of flare in the back, almost too much. And has nice contact all the way through. So it fits nicely in the front, nice contact here, but maybe too much flare in the back. For the horse, it doesn't matter. For the riders, they would see a lot of gap in the back. So if I put a Western tree on top, I would recommend to take the blanket off, okay, just without a Navajo pad.
Cool.
You look for the D-ring or the concho, which is right there. That's where that sits. This one here has a nice flare. Lots of flare in the back. And then you flip this over. Run your pen underneath. And then you want to feel if it has, this has a nice contact, just like the tree. We had good flare here, too much flare in the back, but an even contact through there.
Cool.
Now the Western tree could have a center, a rear balance, or a forward balance. It depends what make. There's 11 different Western saddles on it. This particular Western saddle, I don't know if we showed your people, you can change the seat.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
And you have the different fender option and the different ground seat option. Okay, but for the horse, the answer would have been very simple if I would have said, yes, it's the same, but I wanted to show you.
Yeah, that's so cool. And then I guess for the last question, I have someone who's asked, is there anything to do if my saddle fits perfectly everywhere, but the withers are very close? I only have about one finger between the saddle and his withers. What should I do?
Okay, so that is a relatively easy question to answer, because what you could do is if the channel is wide enough, you just put a nice saddle pad, what is even thickness all the way through from start to finish. But make sure it has a nice wither clearance. Sometimes saddle pads, they're very straight and don't have a nice wither clearance. And if it fits everywhere, but doesn't have a lot of clearance here, and then you put a pad on top like this one here, no wither clearance, you create more problem than good. You need one if you have a high withered horse with a high cutout.
Yeah.
And the actual thickness of the pad doesn't matter. If it's wool pad for Western, they also come with a cutout. Without cutout, pads cause this nerve, this cranial nerve 11, to spasm very quick. You see it running down there because it put excess pressure on the withers. Okay, so saddle pads, sometimes you can go with, they're very, very good half pads where you can put shims in it. Okay, make sure like this one has a loop so you can tighten it to the saddle, because those are really bad when you have shim pads and they move. It's kind of like an insole in your shoe, what moves.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, and then if we do we have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay. This girl said, when my horse was fitted, they said to place the saddle so that it is in line with the last rib. Is this correct? His saddle also slides back, but I don't know why.
Okay. So I'm going to show this picture first. It's kind of like a pair of pants. If you put your pants on way too high, then the inseam cuts in your crotch. If you put it way too low, then you barely can walk. So there's a certain way you put your pants. You put it so that your inseam don't hit in your instep and it doesn't restrict your walking. And with the saddle, the same thing. You cannot pass this last rib. So what if it puts too far forward? Then you sit on the cartilage and you sit on the shoulder blade. Besides the lung meridian point, you permanently cripple the horse in the cartilage. Many, many, many people understand how important it is to get the saddle off the front, off the last rib. But you can't just push it forward to get it off the last rib, because the shoulders, okay, you will damage, like on picture B, you will damage severely the shoulders. And I mean, there's other people who have done quite extensive amount of research in terms of dissecting horses, put the saddle on a dissective horse. Here the horse is laying on the side, the skin is off. And then they put the metal point into the shoulder and they could see how that saddle, this is the cartilage I was talking about earlier,
Yeah.
cripples. So you can't put the saddle too far forward and too far back. The reason why the saddle goes back, when the horse's leg goes forward, the upper arm pushes
Yeah, wow.
shoulder back. 9 out of 10 times, here you see the saddle pushed forward, backwards and to the right. When the distance from D-ring to D-ring, this is saddle upside down, is not wide enough, the tree is not wide enough in the tree width. Okay, so most of the time, the horse is really, really, really much wider in the shoulder and the tree is too narrow, or like this horse. You see the deepest point is here and they have no stomach line. It goes backwards to the sternum and the stomach. So the girth slides always to the narrow spot. Most horses have a little bit more of a tummy here, okay, or the rib cage widens. But if a horse has a very, very skinny underline, like this gray horse, okay, the girth will go always to the narrow spot. So check the underline, and you need most likely to have 5-point breastplate, what holds the girth in place. Otherwise, it will pull the saddle back. If he doesn't have this narrow ribs and that skinny stomach, more like this horse here, well sprung, more tummy, okay? And it still goes back, then it's your tree width too narrow. You'll probably see dry spots. And you need, depends what saddle tree it is, you need to widen the tree width and or the angle.
Yeah, that's a lot of good information. Okay. Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah,
Or
of course.
Perfect. 1 sec. Someone said, okay, wait, I'm just gonna pick between these ones. Someone asked, can a horse just be under-muscled and not have dips in its back from poor saddle fit? My thoroughbred's spine kind of sticks up, but I always just thought he didn't have muscle there. I don't ride him very often.
So say that again.
They're asking, can a horse just be under-muscled and have pockets behind the shoulders that aren't from poor saddle fit? Their thoroughbred spine kind of sticks up, but I always just thought he didn't have muscle there. I don't ride him often, they said.
Yes. So if we look at the skeleton of a horse, what sticks out a lot is these bones in the center. Like I was showing earlier, this long bone, right, from the withers, is super long. So imagine there would be no muscle. So if you ever seen a human who is really lean, okay, he's not starved, but he's just lean. You know, you can see a lot of muscle definition. And if they're really, well, undernourished, then you can see bones. Like on a horse, you see rib cage, then these stick out. And if the top muscle group, the longest muscle, what runs left and right of the spine, it's not there. Okay, so then you see the spine being the highest point. So the atrophy, okay, comes on a horse's back, like this one here behind the withers, when the tree was too narrow or when the muscle is not used. So if you think about a Mustang who has never been ridden, if you see Mustangs and they're not necessarily starved, or wild horses, you can see that sometimes on YouTube, you don't see the bones sticking out. But you could maybe see one or the other, like humans. Some people eat, and they're skinny. Other people eat a little bit and they're heavy. You know, the metabolism on humans, same with horses, could be that that particular horse has a high metabolism. In other words, the food falls right off. And if the horse is not ridden, the muscles are not developed. If they have super holes here, even just with riding a little bit, that most of the time is an indicator that the tree is too narrow and it pinches all these muscles flat. Let's look at that. The spinalis, the trapezius, rhomboideus, these are life essential muscle to the horse. Without these muscles, the horse cannot look up, can't balance his neck, and can't run away from danger. So if I don't have that, then my muscle needs to compensate. And you see this dip here in front of the withers, or you see, well, everything's saggy and droopy like on this guy here. Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, no, that makes sense too. Cool. Okay. We are at, okay, it's 1 o'clock. Do you have time for, oh, see if there's any more questions that we haven't answered. There's one more question about saddle pads if you have time. Otherwise, okay.
Mhm.
They said, I use the Lemieux close contact saddle pads with my saddle. Should I be using a half pad with it? I was thinking of a half pad with shims only at the front. This is the same person who asked about the wither clearance only being one finger.
Okay. So I love the Lemieux. It's a really nice saddle pad. Okay. So very important. If you put a saddle pad, this is the Mattis. Okay. If it's a close contact, I assume it doesn't have all the sheepskin. It's more like that. Just the cotton, close contact, has a nice wither relief. So if you get a half pad, okay, to lift the front, some people use what they call, let me see if I have another picture. Yeah, here. They call it the wither lifter. That will actually twist your tree or can break it in the center because now the saddle has no more contact where you sit, the most important field for the rider to sit. So these are really bad. So saddle pads with only, let me find a saddle pad with, here we go. A saddle pad where you can put shims in it. If you put something in the front only, make sure you gradually make it thinner and thinner and thinner and thinner to the back. But what that will do, it lifts the front, but it might throw you in the share seat or puts you behind the motion. If you said the saddle fits everywhere the same, everywhere good, but it's too close to the withers, I would then make the pads everywhere to get the weight up evenly of the horse's withers without you falling in the share seat. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Yeah, I think that's very helpful. Okay, I think that's it for all the questions. We've answered all of them.
I got a lot of question and answers in the book. What many vets use, it's a textbook and many other courses.
Oh, cool.
Because there's so many saddle fitting questions. And what is saddle fitting? You know, it's not just an opinion; it's scientific facts.
Yeah,
you know, some
exactly.
people get sponsored in saddles and they just say what they have to say. You know, and that's very often misleading. Something is fashionable, but the horse doesn't care if it has rhinestone, if it's brown, if it comes from this company. You know, the horse by nature, it's a flight animal, and whatever hurts, they will run. They're not fighting, right? So, and unfortunately, more and more people know it's wrong, but cognitive dissonance means most people know deep in their belly, the saddle is hurting my horse, but I pretend he's tough enough to stand it.
Yeah.
And that's where everything falls apart. So I hope that makes a little sense. Remember, saddles are never meant, sorry, horses are never meant to carry humans. Okay? Saddle fitting is just to an interface and make the horizontal and vertical spine comfortable without hurting the horse, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that
Do
makes
you
sense.
think that was helpful today to help
Yeah.
people to understand how important the spinal clearance was?
Yeah, I think for sure, because a lot of people have saddles that definitely don't have a wide enough channel. And it's not like something that a lot of people talk about, I've found. So I think that it's, yeah, this is a very good topic. And then it lets people check their own saddles so that they can look at things. And then even if they have a saddle fitter, they know what questions to ask if there's a problem. And yeah.
100%. And people always wonder why I do this. Why are you giving all this free information? If you have this horse jump through fire for me, this horse was the horse I was trying my 84 Olympics in LA with. We went fast to the ring. European Championship was great. And all of a sudden, from one day to the next, And with all my schooling and saddle fitting and all this and that, you know, I never paid attention to the most obvious. You know, where are the nerves on the back? Where are the ligaments on the back? Where's the cartilage? Where can it make a lot of harm? Where can it make it a lot of good? So I swore to myself and I says, you know, my master told me it takes 3 human lives to learn how to ride.
Yeah.
And it's our duty as a rider to teach what we learned on the animal to the followers, instructors, or riders to pass on, hey, you know, the horses are not that mean, they're kind. And I took this up as a saddler and I says, there is so many horses in pain and so many saddles what needs to be fitted. So if I can pass this information on to people, to other saddle makers, other people through you, then no horse should ever suffer. And if people can't find one, you can learn it yourself on our academy. You know, it's online. There's many courses, many videos, even for veterinarians. If you want to do this as a career, I mean, since the pandemic, this is academy is going through the roof because more people are now at home with the horses and they want to learn, and you can do it at home. You know, if you ever have more interest, it says, oh, who can I contact? Send Julia Allebrand an email, julia@saddlefitacademy.com. So there is tons of information there. And all I can say, remember that these animals love to be in the herd.
Mm-hmm.
They love to eat, walk 20 miles a day, graze 17 hours a day. And when we put them in captivity, we need to start them carefully, gentle, until we have them to the most upper level you desire. Again, it was a pleasure to be with you
Yeah.
today.
Yeah, thank you. That was very educational.
And don't hesitate to pass the information further.
Oh yeah,
But
absolutely.
and look forward to talk to you the next time.
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, doing another one soon, I'm sure. And then, yeah, for people who don't know, Saddle Fit for Life also has a Facebook and Instagram page that has really good informational photos and stuff that they post. So check those out too. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank
All
you
right.
so much for coming on and for all the information you gave and answering people's questions. Yeah. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Yeah. Talk soon.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.